welcome to the 1111 Synchronized broadcast. Hope everyone is doing well, staying safe, staying happy and positive, and keeping the good vibes going. Everyone just take a deep breath in and a deep breath out. Very good. If you have any topic requests you'd like to hear covered on this channel during this season, please direct us to my inbox at Agent K21 Podcast on Instagram, at Agent K21 on Instagram and Twitter. Find me on Facebook, all the social media platforms. I am available for your question, concerns, requests. If you have a feature, if you'd like me to be featured on your page, let's collaborate. Let me know. So welcome for those who are returning and joining. Welcome back. For those who are just now arriving, hello and welcome as well. Feel free to send these messages, share these podcasts with friends, families, frenemies, anybody who you think would benefit from it. I definitely appreciate all my listeners. Thank you all for your time and your attention. And feel free to subscribe as well so you can hear these as soon as they are posted. And we're talking about self-love. So this kind of goes hand in hand with the previous episode of unconditional love, right? So is self-love selfish, right? That is a number one question. Is self-love selfish? Is that people's way of just saying, oh, I'm just self-love, but really they're being selfish? Is that just a guise to be selfish? Well, that is not my opinion of self-love, but depending on people's backgrounds, beliefs, just ways of life, self-love has been not as necessarily appreciated. It's been kind of diminished and demonized in certain ways, in certain regards, as seen as selfishness. However, to the contrary, self-love is the exact opposite of selfishness. Now, we're going to go through what all of that means from my perspective. And if it resonates with you, please take it. If it doesn't, just leave it. And self-love to me is the foundation of all love. You know, you cannot give what you do not have. And so if there is a discrepancy between self-love, if you feel depleted in that area, the love that you think we're giving to others is actually from a very hollow place. It's not from the deep abiding well of self-love. Now, when we give ourselves self-love, unconditional self-love, it's not just bubble baths and candlelight dinners that we're doing for ourselves. It's actually being able to see the light in the dark that resides within us and resides within everyone, and accepting it, bringing it closer, appreciating it, loving it unconditionally. What do I mean by loving it unconditionally? It means when the conditions have changed, the love still remains. It means that there's nothing that you could do, say, or not be. It's knowing that you're enough. It's feeling the worthiness that you already are. It's feeling the wholeness of yourself. So self-love is the foundation for all the love that we give and all the love that we can receive. And any lack of self-love is going to show up primarily in our relationships. Now, self-love has been criticized as being selfishness because most of our society has been religious, political, societal programming, which is, conformity and just self-sacrifice, right? Now, sacrifice is good, but self-sacrifice is abandoning ourselves. It's a self-betrayal. And we do that in order to, some of us do that for belonging. Some of us do that for connection. And it's a program that our mind has running, oftentimes based on, that reptilian mind of how we used to be. Our first human instincts, we needed each other. We still need each other. But in early times, if you were going against the grain, that meant your safety was threatened. That meant your loved ones could be killed. That meant you weren't going to be fed. So everyone had the program of we all must be the same. We must be sacrificing for ourselves, sacrificing for others, and in an unhealthy way. And so I made a list of what self-love and selfishness is to kind of break it down. But first, before I get into that list, let's see what the web has to say. What is the definition of self-love? The Oxford definition of self-love: regard for one's own well-being and happiness, chiefly considered as a desirable rather than narcissistic characteristic. So, why is self-love a desirable trait? Well, it's a desirable trait because the amount of love you can give to yourself is the amount of love you can give to others. And as I said previously, if our caregivers are, parents, grandparents, whoever, they didn't know how to love themselves, it's impossible for them to teach us how to love ourselves because they cannot show what they've never learned. And so oftentimes we try to get love by giving, and we feel depleted because we are not giving it to ourselves. We are trying to get the love that we want from ourselves to everyone else. And we try to get that same love from everyone that we want to ourselves instead of getting it from ourselves. So again, self-love is the root of all trees, right? It is the foundation. It is the fountain of wellness, of love, of unconditional regard. It is what brings positive experiences in your life, right? I saw another definition. It says, how do you define self-love? Thank you, Google. Self-love means having a high regard for your own well-being and happiness. Self-love means taking care of your own needs and not sacrificing your well-being to please others. Self-love means not settling for less than you deserve. What are some examples of self-love? And it just continues to kind of get interesting after that. No right or wrong way to define self-love. Self-love is an independent, personalized path. So it is, in my opinion, it is a way to integrate all of who you are. It's recognizing your healthy traits and recognizing your toxic traits and treating them exactly the same, treating them with the same compassion and love that they deserve, not disregarding one for the other and not shaming yourself for any of it, but really to embrace and fully love. That is the only way, and I do mean the only way, that you can truly love someone else. So anytime we feel like, well, I just love other people, but, I don't really expect a full return on that. Yeah, that I get that. But it's also because the expectation but if the expectation is external, it's highlighting a deficiency there. So instead of trying to get, self-love reassures that you already have. Self-love already reassures that even if no one else loves you, which is a lie, people do. If no one else loves you, hypothetically, no one else loves you, do you love you? And you'll feel the radiance of that, knowing that that is more than enough. That if that one person being yourself loves you, you are satisfied, you are fulfilled, right? There's no need for proving yourself or abandoning yourself to get the love that you desire, because it really doesn't matter what anyone else says, thinks, believes, how they treat you. You treat you well, and that gives you the ability to treat others well, and naturally that draws in people who will see you, people who will validate you, people who will truly love you. But anytime you're operating out of a selfish place or a place of not having self-love, we continue to attract and recreate those traumas. We continue to attract and recreate people who don't see us, don't validate us, don't hear us, don't know us. And it's all a reflection of within. As within, so without. So if we don't know ourselves fully, then it's impossible for anyone to know us fully. And it's impossible for us to know them or to be known by them. So I made a list here of what self-love and what selfishness means to me. And this is my list. You can add to it. You can take from it. You don't have to even resonate with it at all. But these are some traits that I find in the self-love category, because when it comes down to it, self-love is really from your soul. It's really the purity of your soul. And I saw a post of like ego stuff versus soul that I might read here later. But it's really from your soul. Selfishness comes from the ego. Now, what is the ego? The ego is basically this falsified personality that we create because of the socialization process that we all have to go through. It's not really who we are. It's who we think we are. It's who we've become based on, not wanting to experience rejection or needing to protect ourselves. That's a big difference with selfishness and self-love. Now, if these things I list, if they resonate with you and you think, oh man, half of that list of the selfish column was me, that doesn't necessarily mean you're selfish. Only you know your situation, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're selfish. We all have these traits within us, especially if our needs were not met early on in life. That's where these traits develop from. If we didn't see people in front of us actually love themselves unconditionally, if we continue to see our caregivers abandon themselves or people please or be codependent, then that's what we grew up thinking was love. And, it takes a lot to recognize the deficiencies of love, because can be a grueling process. It's a painful realization when you're no longer operating out of denial or projection or deflection or any of those coping mechanisms. They start to disappear, and you start to see the truth and start to embrace reality, which may be grim at first. But just check out this list I'm going to share, and no worries if you feel like, oh man, I'm really not where I want to be. That's okay. As long as you know where you are, you can get to where you're going. It's having that ability to recognize that you're a masterpiece and a work in progress simultaneously, and that is beautiful. That is nothing to feel wrong about. Okay, there is no arrival, there is no destination. The destination is always an exceeding line anyway. So once you get to one goal, there will be another. So be kind to yourself, and let's dive into it. So, my list of self-love. Self-love operates from a place of abundance. Self-love is overflowing. It is, it's so much that it overflows to everyone around you. So when you're operating out of self-love, you don't even have to do anything around the people that are around you. They'll be able to feel your frequency, your vibration. They'll be able to feel your energy, and they will be blessed by just being in your presence. Selfishness, however, operates from the place of lack. It operates from a very empty well, right? It's never enough. It always needs more. It doesn't realize what it has. It kind of takes itself for granted because that's how it operated. That's how it was treated in its early stages. So it doesn't have that ability to pour into anyone else because it constantly needs to be poured into. It doesn't have the ability to give, essentially. And so selfishness grips. If you give something to selfishness, it's going to grip it so tightly that it has no room for nothing else. And it clutches it in such a way because it doesn't want it to be taken away. It becomes very possessive, right? It's very much like mine. This is for me. I'm not giving this away. It's very self-motivated, right? Self-love, however, provides the ability to hold space. Not only can you hold space for yourself, but you can hold space for everyone around you. And what do I mean by holding space? I mean, a few examples is being able to accept where you are and accept where other people are without trying to change them, fix them, mold them, shift them, shame them, blame them, none of that. That would be more in the selfish category. Holding space out of self-love is saying, I honor my reality and I honor your reality, and finding where they can meet, finding that bridge, right? Self-love has biovision, meaning it can see more than one perspective. It can see itself. It can see everything around it. It can see where people's projections come from or where their deficiencies may lie without judging it. It just holds space for it again. Whereas selfishness is univision. It's only seeing itself. And it's not even seeing itself clearly. It's only seeing itself through the perceptions of others, through a very dimly lit glass, right? It's seeing it through like a dirty windshield. It sees only self, so it doesn't see how it even acts to other people. Selfishness does not see how selfish it really is. It doesn't see how people are being perceived. It doesn't hold space. It doesn't see in that kind of way. Selfishness is all about me, operates all about me. It's very immature in that kind of sense of not being able to see more than one perspective or more than one reality. Whereas self-love gives you the ability to see we. Self-love is all-inclusive. It's not just I'm self-loving so that I can be better. It's no, I have to fill my own cup first so that I can be of service to others. The classic example that comes to me, I love this metaphor of self-love. So they use this a lot, and maybe you've heard this example before, but for those who haven't, I'm going to share this example of a image of self-love. So when you're on an aircraft, if you're taking a plane somewhere, I know there's not much traveling right now, but if you've ever been on an aircraft before and they're giving the safety regulations, the stewardess will say, when the oxygen mask pops down, put on your mask first before helping anyone else. Even if there's small children around you, put on your mask first. And so that definition right there is saying, hey, you have to help you first before you can help anyone else. That's not selfish. Now we can take that situation and we see that and say, oh, that's not selfish. You have to, But if you take that situation, flip it and see someone do the exact opposite, some people might reward that, some people may not, because that's counterproductive in a lot of ways. You have to get your own self right before you can help anyone else. And so selfishness is the exclusion of others. It excludes itself and it excludes everyone else. Selfishness in that situation would be putting on your own mask and not helping anyone else. That's selfish. Self-love is putting on your mask on first and then helping others. Self-love is about serving. So it's not about gimme. It's about how can I help? How can I help? Because I am overflowing with the love and the practice of self-care that I've already granted myself. Now I'm able to show up and help. Whereas selfishness is about service. How can you serve me? What can I get from this situation? What is going to serve my needs best? It has no consideration for anyone else's needs because it's not looking to serve anyone else, not even itself really. It's not even aware of its own needs when we operate out of a selfish place. We're not aware of our own needs because else we would be able to get them met, either by ourselves or by finding people and asking for them. But instead, selfishness will try to either manipulate for their needs to be met or is only seeking to be served. Self-love is operating out of the practice of non-attachment. It's that confidence of, I don't really need anyone to validate me or to show concern because I've already granted that myself. There's no lack. Whereas selfishness is attachment or detachment. So selfishness operates out of, that attachment style of either being possessive, the attachment style of being avoidant, altogether. It's very much like, if it's not working in the moment, I don't want it. And it doesn't really have the foresight. Again, when I said that univision, it doesn't have the foresight to see the choices that will lead to the best predicament, because the self-centeredness, the selfishness is only focused on the moment. Whereas self-love, you can be present in the moment, but also aware of the choices that you're going to use to create other moments. Hope that makes sense. Self-love is about giving and receiving. When you have a proper amount of self-love, you are able to give and receive, because first you had to give yourself the love that you desire. So once you give yourself that love, you had to receive your love as well. And when you can receive your own love, you can actually receive how other people show up for you too. And that is in a non-restrictive way. Again, that non-attachment is, when people show up, it's not like you have to do this, and this. It's not critical. It's more just like accepting, okay, this is how that person wants to show up, and I receive that. That doesn't mean don't communicate your needs and, how you want to be loved, but it's not pressuring to be loved in a certain way. It's accepting, it's very open. Whereas selfishness is a taking and getting situation. Selfishness is all about, what can I get from this? How can I take from this? It's always looking for an opportunity to get its needs met, right? And it'll do that in any kind of way, whether it has to steal for it, whether it has to, bargain for it, whether it has to abandon itself for it. It'll do it because it's so lacking that it doesn't even realize that the selfishness is causing that. Whereas the self-love is able to give with an open hand. Again, that grip versus holding space. And, self-love is really like what's in it for me. I mean, not self-love. Selfishness is all about what's in it for me. Whereas the self-love is like, I've already taken care of myself. I know what's in it for me. So how can I add to you? Self-love is about adding. It's about sharing the love that you already have for yourself with the world, instead of taking the love that the world already doesn't even have. It's not about taking. It's about sharing. So self-love definitely is more of a open-handed process of, how can I share this great experience that I am with the world? Whereas selfishness is, how can I take an experience from the world? Those are a lot of examples I have. Just a few more I'm going to say is that self-love, the premise of self-love is love, right? It's not in the exclusion of others. It's saying, I love myself enough to create healthy boundaries. I love myself enough to be authentic. I love myself enough to speak my truth. I love myself enough to fill in the blank, right? To not people please, to not abandon myself. Whereas selfishness operates out of fear. It operates out of, my needs weren't met before, so I have to find ways to control to get those needs met. I have to gaslight people. I have to manipulate. I cannot go about this directly, so I'm going to do it indirectly. And, selfishness comes from a very low place because it's not even able to recognize that it has abandoned and rejected and neglected itself. It continues to perpetuate what has been done to itself, meaning that selfishness. And it's all about the intent at the end of the day. The selfish intent is to protect. I have to protect what's mine because no one else is going to protect it. I have to protect myself because no one else protected me. I have to protect and hoard. I have to be a hoarder almost of the love and of, the value, the money, the whatever it is. Whereas self-love is like, the premise of self-love is, or the intention is not out of fear, but it's out of love. So different intentions is why it operates differently, why it shows up differently. When you have self-love, a good foundation of self-love, you're able to accept, embrace, and appreciate all the things about yourself. Whereas the selfishness wants to hide. It wants to hide the things that it can't deal with. It kind of like, it doesn't really go deep. It's very shallow. It's very surfacey. Whereas self-love is diving deep into everything. A few more things. Self-love is constant. It's steady. It's a streaming flow that continues to go no matter what, right? And again, it goes back to the overflow that I mentioned, that it continues to pour from its own well, from its own cup. Whereas the selfishness can operate out of an inconsistency, can operate out of from an instability. It's not very stable. And that's why most times people who operate out of selfishness have had insecure attachment styles, which is more than not, people more than not. Self-love has the ability to see. It has intimacy with itself and with others, meaning it can see itself clearly, positive and negative traits, and it also can see how to meet those needs and what those needs are. Selfishness, however, is blind. It's blind to its own wants and needs and desires. It's blind to other people's wants, needs, and desires. And so you can almost feel when you're operating out of selfishness yourself, or when you're dealing with someone who's operating out of selfishness, is that they don't see you. They don't even know who you are. They have no reference point to how to meet and greet you and how to show up for you, because they're only showing up for themselves. So they see you through a dark glass, and that glass is tainted with how they project on you, which is usually, past traumas or people they think you're like, or their low self-worth, essentially. And so they don't actually know what you need, because they don't know what they need, meaning the selfishness won't allow them to know what they need. And so, And the last thing I'm going to share is that selfishness creates separation. So self-love does not create separation. Self-love is unity. It's a bridge within yourself. It's taking all the fragmented pieces within yourself and creating a safe space for them and gluing them all back together and becoming whole. Whereas selfishness, one part or a fragmented part of ourselves may want one thing. It's never in alignment with getting on the same page. It doesn't really compromise with ourself within itself. It creates more separation and more fragmentation. And that's my list of a few things that happen with self-love and selfishness. So I hope you can see the difference between self-love and selfishness. So next time someone says, "Isn't self-love just selfishness?" you can either send them this podcast or you can just reassure them that no, it's not. It's actually the most selfless thing I could do is to be self-loving. As Alan Cohen said, when we love ourselves, we are bringing love to the world. That is a quote by Alan Cohen. When we love ourselves, we are bringing love to the world. Now, the last thing I want to share is this ego versus soul post. I'll probably post it at some point. And you guys have probably seen it. If you're on social media, you may have seen this. But for those who are not, ego versus soul. Now, mind you, anything that lines up in the soul column, I hope that you can see how that is a representation of self-love. The ego operates out of selfishness. So ego seeks to serve itself. Soul seeks to serve others. Ego seeks outward recognition. Soul seeks inner authenticity. Ego sees life as a competition. Soul sees life as a gift. Ego seeks to preserve self. Soul seeks to preserve others. Ego looks outward. Soul looks inward. Ego feels lack. Soul feels abundant. Ego is mortal. Soul is eternal. Ego is drawn to lust. Soul is drawn to love. Soul seeks wisdom. Soul is wisdom. Did I say soul? Ego seeks wisdom. Soul is wisdom. Ego enjoys the prize. Soul enjoys the journey. Ego is cause to pain. Soul is cause of healing. Ego rejects God. Soul embraces God. Ego seeks to be filled. Soul is eternally wholeness. Ego is me. Soul is we. And that's all for now, guys. I do thank you for joining me. I appreciate you spending your time to listen to these podcasts, and let me know what you want to hear, and I will get back to you shortly. I hope you continue to have a great morning, day, night, evening, afternoon, midnight, wherever this is meeting and greeting you. Take care. Until next time.